Before you said a word, before you stepped into the room, they already knew who you were. Not because they met you, not because they understood you, but because someone else gave them a version to believe. A whisper, a scroll, a glance. They judged you by fragments, by silence, by shadows you didn't control. And you let them. You said nothing. You assumed the truth would speak for itself. But it didn't. It never does. The world doesn't reward truth. It rewards perception. It rewards the person who owns the story before anyone else gets to tell it. And while you tried to be kind, tried to be good, tried to be real, they wrote a simpler version of you. One that fit their comfort. One that kept them in control. You became the quiet one. The safe one. The one no one fears interrupting. Now ask yourself, how many times did you speak, and they didn't hear you? How many times did you show up, and they still forgot you? Because reputation is not who you are. It's who they think you are when you're not there to correct them. And if you don't build it with precision, they will build it for you with laziness, with rumor, with assumption. So stop chasing truth. Start crafting impact. You were not born with presence. You forge it. In silence. In precision. In the way you teach people how to speak your name. Reputation is not a mirror. It's a weapon. And right now yours is pointed at you. So here's the decision. Keep hoping they'll finally see you. Or build a presence so sharp they never forget you again. Because when they feel your name, before they hear your voice, you've already won. But even when you know the truth, it's not enough. Because reputation doesn't come from what you know. It comes from what they fear. Reputation is not a reflection of truth. It's a mirror of how dangerous you feel to the people around you. They don't describe you based on facts. They describe you based on how safe they feel when your name enters the room. That's why silence gets respect. And friendliness gets forgotten. That's why the cold one is always remembered. And the kind one is always ignored. You think you're being humble. They think you're weak. You think you're being generous. They think you're desperate. Because reputation is not logical. It's primal. It's not built on who you are. It's built on how they feel about the threat you might become. They don't fear your skills. They fear your silence. They don't respect your kindness. They respect the fact that you didn't need to ask for it. You walk in. You speak less. And somehow, the room listens harder. Because people don't respect transparency. They respect tension. And tension comes from mystery. Now ask yourself, when was the last time your presence made someone sit up straighter? When was the last time you didn't say much and they still remembered you for days? If the answer is never, then your reputation isn't working. Because if you're easy to read, you're easy to dismiss. If you're easy to explain, you're easy to forget. You were taught to build a good name by being nice. By working hard. By staying quiet. But here's what they never told you. A good name means nothing if people don't feel anything when they hear it. And feeling is built in fear. Fear of disappointing you. Fear of crossing you. Fear of underestimating you. That's not cruelty. That's structure. That's survival. Because people protect themselves around what they respect. And they relax around what they think is harmless. So which one are you? The one they study, or the one they scroll past? Your reputation isn't what you say. It's what they assume you're capable of without needing proof. So, stop speaking for yourself. Start becoming someone who doesn't need to be explained. But today, it's not whispers that shape you. It's pixels. And what they scroll becomes what they believe. You thought social media was a mirror, but it's a mask, a costume you wear for people who don't even know you. You post to be seen. They scroll, they tap, they move on, and you call that connection. They like your vacation photo. They double tap your quote. But the moment you fall, they vanish. You gave them access. They gave you numbers. And you believe that meant support. But followers are not loyalty. Likes are not respect. And attention is not power. You built a presence by being everywhere. And in doing so, you became invisible. Because when everyone has a piece of you, no one values the whole. That's how the myth begins. Not the one you control, but the one they invent. They think you're confident because you posted a gym selfie. They think you're broken because you shared your struggles. They think they know you because they follow your feed. But what they know is fiction. And the scariest part is that fiction spreads faster than truth. You created an image to feel seen. But that image now speaks louder than your real voice ever could. And the algorithm doesn't care who you really are. It cares who people react to. So the more you share, the less you are. And the more they see, the less they feel. Because presence is built on scarcity. You were taught more is better. More friends. More posts. More visibility. But Machiavelli would say more noise means less weight. So start subtracting. Start unsharing. Start disappearing. Because mystery is magnetic. And silence makes people look twice. Let your absence raise questions. Let your restraint build tension. Because 1,000 people who see you can never replace the one who feels your presence. So ask yourself this: is your online identity a legacy or a performance? Would they care if you stopped posting tomorrow? Would they notice if you vanished? Or are you just one more voice in a crowd that never listens? But presence isn't just about visibility. It's about silence. And how it echoes louder than noise. The man who says too much is easy to predict. And what's predictable loses power. Real presence doesn't come from being loud. It comes from being unreadable. Machiavelli understood this. He knew the moment they can define you, they can control you. So he chose the opposite. He built silence. He crafted absence. And through that he built fear. You don't have to speak to be remembered. You don't have to show everything to be seen. In fact, the more they know about you, the less they need to respect you. Mystery is not a lack of presence. It's presence distilled into tension. You say one thing and walk away. They replay it 10 times. They talk about it for days. Because mystery forces them to do the work. They fill in the blanks. They project strength onto your silence. They create power where you didn't even speak. Now ask yourself, have you been so visible that no one fears missing you? Have you been so open that no one leans in anymore? You've been told to be authentic, to be expressive, to be loud. But here's the truth. Kings don't overshare. Generals don't explain. And legends don't speak unless it's necessary. Because every word you say should echo, not just be heard. When you're mysterious, you control the frame. You decide what they notice and what they never get to see. That is strategy. When you disappear, you don't lose relevance. You increase weight. Absence builds imagination. And imagination builds myth. The man who never yells gets silence when he stands. The woman who rarely speaks makes every word feel sacred. Because when people don't know what you're thinking, they prepare for the worst. So stop filling the room with noise. Start letting the tension speak louder than your voice. If you want to be remembered, don't say everything. Say one unforgettable thing, then vanish. But mystery alone doesn't build power. It must be sharpened into judgment. Most people react when they're hurt. They raise their voice. They justify. They try to look strong. But reaction is weakness in disguise. It shows you care. It shows you're disturbed. It shows you're still emotionally reachable. Machiavelli taught the opposite. He mastered the art of silence that feels like judgment. He didn't punish loudly. He punished precisely. No warnings. No explanations. No revenge speech. Just disappearance. Not your time. Not your energy. Not even your attention. They offended him once. And he erased them without expression. And that is what made people fear him. Because loud punishment is satisfying to the one doing it. But silent punishment terrifies everyone watching. When someone disrespects you and you don't react, you make them feel something deeper than anger. You make them feel irrelevant. That's power. Not in the destruction itself, but in the message it sends. You don't beg for fairness. You don't correct rumors. You don't chase closure. You let absence do the cutting. Now the room is watching. They saw what you didn't say. And they imagine what you could have done if you wanted to. Their minds build the punishment bigger than anything you could ever show. Because imagination is a sharper blade than retaliation. One cold act, done without emotion, becomes a legend. And once people believe you don't need to punish often, they start punishing themselves just to avoid crossing you. Now ask yourself, have you ever vanished someone so quietly, they still wonder what they did wrong? If not, then your standards are not being felt. Let them see that your silence isn't mercy. It's precision. And once that message spreads, you won't need to enforce respect. They will enforce it for you. But even power needs reward. And when used rarely, praise becomes prophecy. Ordinary people hand out praise because they want to be liked. But kings, they give it like a blessing. And that's why it's remembered. Machiavelli understood that praise is not a kindness. It's a weapon if used sparingly. If everyone gets your approval, then your approval means nothing. But if it's rare, calculated, and earned, it becomes sacred. Now, when you speak, they lean in. They crave your words. Not for validation, but for status. You're not just complimenting them, you're elevating them above the others. And the others, they notice. That's how hierarchy is built without saying a word. Praise becomes a throne, not a sentence. A single nod feels like a coronation. A small word of respect feels like legacy. And when you stay silent, they wonder, did I fail? Did he fall short? Did I lose favor? Now ask yourself, have you ever withheld praise just long enough to make them question everything? If not, then your approval is still cheap. You don't reward loudly. You reward strategically. You choose your moment. You choose your audience. And when you bless, you do it in public. With precision. Because public reward creates private obsession. They replay the moment. They tell others about it. They seek it again. And now your words become currency. You never say thank you for supporting me. You offer them access. You bring them closer. And in return, they defend your name like their own. That's how loyalty is engineered. Not by constant approval, but by rare, impactful recognition. And here's the real trick. You make your praise feel earned but never guaranteed. You make your silence a test they can never finish. And when your approval becomes something they chase, your myth spreads by itself. That is how power is scaled through generosity without losing control. But power isn't just action. It's symbolism. It's the way you walk. Pause. And let silence move before you do. No one worships what they understand. No one fears what feels familiar. Normal is invisible. It speaks politely. It moves safely. It disappears quickly. But power isn't normal. It's symbolic. When people see you, they should feel something before you say anything. Your walk, your stillness, your tone, your timing. These are not habits. They are architecture. Machiavelli didn't just speak differently. He moved differently. Because sameness makes you replaceable, but symbolism makes you unforgettable. Kings are not born. They are branded. With posture, with presence, with myth. You don't wear black to look stylish. You wear it so no one can tell if you're mourning or preparing for war. You don't respond quickly. You pose. You let silence do the work. Because when you move slower, the world leans in faster. Now ask yourself, when you walk into a room, do people feel order or ignore your presence? Do you control attention or compete for it? Symbolic identity is not about clothing. It's about consistency. You become associated with certain words, certain looks, certain energy. And when that pattern repeats, your name gains weight, even when you're not around. You stop being a person. You become a reference. Now people quote you. Even when you're silent, they adjust their tone. Even when you say nothing, that's when you know your identity has transformed. You don't need to prove power. You become the idea of it. The moment you blend in, you disappear. But the moment you craft an aura, you step outside their reach. And once you're unreachable, you become unforgettable. Don't strive to be relatable. Strive to be untouchable. Not by arrogance, but by control. When you enter a room and shift its rhythm without raising your voice, you've crossed over. You're no longer part of the room. You're the center they orbit around. But when your image is too stable, it becomes forgettable. True legends, they confuse as much as they impress. The most powerful figures in history were never consistent. They were confusing, unstable, contradictory, and that is why they were feared. Machiavelli knew this. He studied leaders who tried too hard to be logical, to be clear, to be understood, and they all became predictable, then forgettable. But the ones who lived between kindness and cruelty, between chaos and calm, they became legends. Because people couldn't figure them out, and what you can't figure out, you don't dare test. One story says you destroyed a man for disrespect. Another says you forgave your enemy in public. They don't match. And that's the point. Now they don't know what to expect. And in that uncertainty, you gain control. Not by being chaotic, but by being deliberately inconsistent. You don't follow patterns. You break them. And then you break them again. Today you reward ruthlessly. Tomorrow, you disappear silently. Now ask yourself, have you made them nervous by acting differently than they expected? If not, they still feel safe around you. And what feels safe doesn't feel sacred. You want to build reverence. Then confuse them. Not recklessly, but strategically. Your unpredictability is not weakness. It's camouflage. It's how you force them to study your mood, decode your silence, analyze your gaze. And while they're busy interpreting you, they forget to attack. You become not just respected but mythologized. Because myths don't follow logic. They live in contradictions. And that makes them eternal. You are no longer a person. You are an enigma. A force. A fog. And no one walks into fog with confidence. So let them collect stories about you that don't make sense. Let them debate what you stand for. Let them argue about your limits. The longer they search for your truth, the more they build your legend. And once you realize they no longer trust their instincts around you, you've already won. And once confusion gives way to legend, something shifts. Your name begins to speak louder than your presence. There comes a moment when you no longer speak. Your name speaks for you. You don't need to be present. Your presence is already there. It's in their posture. It's in their tone. It's in the silence that follows your name. They change how they act. Not because you're watching, but because they believe you might be. That is the final form of control. Machiavelli didn't chase reputation. He built one so precise that it entered the room before he did. That's the moment your myth becomes autonomous. You don't correct rumors. They silence themselves. You don't demand respect. They grant it before you even speak. Not because of what you've done, but because of what they believe you might do. Fear based on possibility is stronger than fear based on memory. And belief once internalized no longer needs your reinforcement. They ask themselves, what would you say? How would you react? Would this please you or insult you? You're not there. But they edit themselves anyway, because your standards became their filter. Now ask yourself, do people shift when your name enters the room? Do they lower their voice when referencing you? If not, your presence is still manual, still dependent, still fragile. But once your reputation reaches myth status, you move less and influence more. Your image becomes a law they follow without instruction. They start to speak your phrases. They echo your code. They carry your values as if they invented them. That's when you stop managing power and start multiplying it. Because now you don't need to defend your name. They do it for you. Not out of fear of punishment, but out of fear of disappointing your myth. That's the shift. When they fear losing your approval more than gaining anyone else's. When your silence feels louder than another man's orders. You've stopped being a leader. You've become a system. And systems don't chase loyalty. They generate it. But myths are fragile too, unless you craft them for one purpose only. Inevitability. A reputation built for approval dies the moment opinions shift. But a reputation built on fear, on mystery, on controlled illusion, outlives the man who forged it. You've spent years trying to be seen the right way, trying to correct what others misunderstood, trying to be the version they would accept. But here's the brutal truth. You were never in control. Not until now. Because power doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being studied. It comes from being decoded. It comes from being impossible to replace. When your silence feels louder than their shouting, you've already shifted the balance. When your absence makes them hesitate, you've already entered their minds. You don't need followers. You need symbols. You don't need noise. You need weight. And you don't build weight by trying to impress. You build it by becoming the mirror they can't stop staring into. A mirror that reflects their fear, their desire, their need to be approved by something they'll never fully understand. You don't become immortal by speaking louder. You become immortal by being interpreted 1,000 different ways, all of them useful to you. Now ask yourself, are you still trying to be understood? By people who can't even understand themselves? Or are you ready to disappear just enough for them to start worshipping what they can no longer define? Don't build a reputation for attention. Build it for inevitability. And when the room goes silent as you enter, when your enemies soften their tone, when strangers speak your name like you're an idea, not a person, you'll know you did it right. You didn't just win. You became undeniable.